Have you ever just looked at your life and realized you're in a relationship that feels weirdly familiar? Like you've been in this exact same spot before, with a different person, feeling drained and totally unseen. It is such a common and painful pattern. But, understanding where it all comes from, that's the key to finally breaking free. So, let's get into it.
Right? It's just so confusing. You might end the relationship, you swear to yourself never again, you're going to do things differently this time, and then, before you know it, you're right back in a dynamic that feels almost identical. If that's you, I want you to know you are so not alone.
I love this phrase from the source material. It calls it being lost in the sauce. And isn't that just perfect? You get so wrapped up in the dysfunction of the relationship, you kind of disappear. You lose your voice, you forget what you even like, and pretty soon you're not even sure who you are anymore outside of that person.
But here's the thing, and this is really important. This whole pattern, it didn't just start with your first adult relationship. No way. To really truly break the cycle for good, we have to go way back. We have to rewind to the very beginning, to a role you were likely given as a child, without ever even knowing it.
This brings us to this really powerful idea of the identified patient. Now, this doesn't mean the kid is the problem. Not at all. It means the child's true, authentic self, just by being them, unconsciously acts like a mirror. And that mirror reflects all of a narcissistic parent's own unhealed stuff right back at them. So what happens? Instead of looking into that mirror and dealing with their own junk, the parent just projects it. It's like they take all their shame, their trauma, their secrets, and they just dump it onto the child. The kid basically becomes a human wastebasket for everything the parent refuses to own.
And get this programming happens super early. We're talking before the age of 7, when your subconscious mind is wide open, like a sponge. A program essentially gets installed, one that teaches the child, your job is to be a source of supply for me. And once that software is running, it just plays on a loop, repeating that same exact dynamic in one relationship after another in your adult life.
Okay, so what does that actually feel like as an adult? What's the real-world result of having this program running in the background for decades? Well, for many, it shows up as this profound, gut-wrenching feeling of being invisible.
You can start to feel like you're literally disappearing. You become a phantom ghost in your own life. You stop saying what you think, you swallow your anger, you make yourself smaller and smaller. And for the narcissist, that's a huge win, because an invisible person is an easy person to control.
So why on earth would anyone stay in a dynamic that feels so awful? What keeps us stuck? When you dig all the way down, you'll almost always find one thing at the root of it, a deep, deep-seated fear of disapproval. It's that childhood program telling you that you need their approval just to be okay.
And the price you pay for that fear is just enormous. It means you sacrifice your own needs to please them. It means you're always walking on eggshells, trying to manage their moods. It means you swallow perfectly valid anger and hurt. And maybe the worst part? You start to accept the shame they throw at you, believing it actually belongs to you.
I just want to pause here for a second, because this line from the material is everything. Read it. You are not here on the planet to be a human wastebasket. Your purpose in this life is not to be a dumping ground for someone else's emotional garbage. You are not just supply. Okay, so we've looked at where this all starts and the damage it does. Let's pivot now to the empowering part. The good stuff. How do you actually interrupt this program? How do you forge a totally new path for yourself?
The absolute biggest shift you can make is moving from reacting to responding. See, when you react, you get angry, you defend yourself, you cry. You're giving the narcissist exactly what they want. You're feeding them. But when you respond, calmly, intentionally, without all the emotion, you starve them of that supply. You keep your energy for yourself, and you, my friend, break the cycle.
And a fantastic practical tool for this is what's called the gray rock method. It's exactly what it sounds like. You make yourself as boring and uninteresting as a plain gray rock. You give short, factual answers. You show no emotion. You don't engage with the drama. The goal isn't to win. The goal is to be so boring, the bully gets tired and goes to find a new toy.
So look, this isn't just about what you need to stop doing. It's about what you get to start doing. This is your toolkit. Start practicing real, solid boundaries. Learn how to release all that toxic energy and channel your own. Get super clear on your own vision and goals. Build a support team of people who actually see you. And finally, start defining life completely on your own terms. Reclaiming your energy is an active, conscious choice. It means taking all that precious focus you used to spend on their drama and pouring it back into yourself, into your passions, into what you value, into building the life you want. That's how you find yourself again.
Now, as we start to wrap this up, I want to leave you with an idea that might just be the most freeing concept of all when it comes to healing from this kind of past.
Just let that one sink in for a second. There is nothing to correct. Think about all the energy we spend trying to go back and fix the past, to make sense of it, to somehow make it right. This reframe says, you don't have to.
Yesterday is over, it's gone. It was never your job to save them or to fix their problems. Your real power isn't in trying to rewrite chapter 1. Your power is right here, right now, in accepting what happened and deciding to build an incredible new future from the exact spot you're standing on today.
And that's the path forward. It really all boils down to a choice. Understanding the programming, the root cause, that's the key that unlocks the door. But it's not the end of the journey. The real question, the one that matters most, is now that you have this key, what are you going to build? What are you going to say? How are you going to choose to use your voice, starting right now?
The identified patient of a dysfunctional family headed by a narcissist, often, very often, their personality structure contradicts or it is in conflict with the narcissistic parents and or grandparents. Sometimes unconsciously, that is why they're selected as scapegoat, because their personality structure seems to be totally opposite of the narcissistic parents and or grandparents. So unconsciously, that sends off alarm bells to the narcissistic parents and or grandparents, meaning they have unresolved issues that they have not dealt with. Those unresolved issues can be anywhere from childhood trauma to alcoholism, to addiction, to obsessive compulsive disorders, or whatever the narcissistic parents and or grandparents continue to deny that they have issues with. The identified patient, which is the scapegoated child, often alerts unconsciously or subconsciously those narcissistic grandparents and or grandparents that something is not quite right and they need to deal with it. Narcissistic parents and or grandparents, they usually project whatever they don't like about themselves, or again, whatever is unresolved with them, onto a particular child. When a person factors in the components of epigenetics, transgenerational and intergenerational trauma, it's easy to see why some adult children of narcissistic parents and or grandparents continue to experience the aftermath of narcissistic abuse even after going no contact.
Have you ever felt like you were just cast in a role you never even auditioned for, especially inside your own family? Well, today we're going to dive into the really tough dynamics of narcissistic family trauma. We're going to look at where it comes from, how it shows up in our lives, and this is the most important part, how you can break that cycle and finally write a new story for yourself.
Okay, before we go any further, let's start with what is probably the single most important message in this entire explainer. If you have ever experienced narcissistic abuse, I really need you to hear this. There is absolutely nothing about you that needs to be corrected. That whole story you were told, the one where you were the problem, it was never, ever true. You were never broken to begin with.
So, where does all this come from? How do these painful dynamics get so deeply rooted that they follow us into adulthood? Well, it all starts with the original blueprint, the one that was laid down way back in childhood. A lot of the time, it begins with something called intergenerational trauma. Just think of it like this. It's how unresolved pain and really unhealthy ways of coping get passed down from one generation to the next. It's almost like a family heirloom that absolutely nobody ever asked for.
And you know, this isn't just some psychological idea. There is actual science to back this up. There's this fascinating field called epigenetics, and it's showing us that severe stress and trauma can leave a literal, physical, chemical mark on our genes that affects how they work. And what's really wild is that these changes can then be passed down to the next generation.
But here is the good news, and this is so important. This is not a life sentence. Not at all. That same research shows that these epigenetic marks can be changed, they can be influenced, and even reversed. Things like positive experiences, therapy, and just creating new healthy environments can literally help rewrite that genetic story. Now, inside these family systems, different roles often get assigned to keep this weird, dysfunctional balance. And honestly, one of the most painful of all these roles is the family scapegoat. This child is often called the identified patient, or IP, and they are, without even realizing it, chosen to carry the weight of all the family's problems. They become the problem child so that nobody else has to take a hard look at what's really going on.
But why, right? Why is one specific child singled out for this? What is it about them that makes them the target for such a heavy, damaging role?
Well, a lot of the time, it's because that child's true nature, maybe their sensitivity or their strength or their strong sense of what's right and wrong, is actually a threat. It challenges the parent's fragile, false reality. That child becomes a kind of living mirror, reflecting back all the parent's own unhealed trauma and self-hatred, and the parent just can't stand to look at it. So they project all of that awfulness onto the child instead. And this programming from childhood, it doesn't just disappear. It creates these powerful echoes that ripple through our entire adult lives, especially when it comes to our relationships. The material we're looking at here actually describes this as a type of grooming. A child is basically programmed to be a source of what's called narcissistic supply, which is really just a constant stream of attention and validation for the parent. This happens a lot with parents who have what's known as a cluster B personality disorder, which includes narcissism. And that early programming, it just runs like software in the background of our minds, making it more likely that we'll unconsciously look for these same kinds of dynamics in our adult relationships.
So this programming shows up in a few key ways. You've got the unresolved trauma, which is the foundation. Then that trauma creates what our source here calls portals and gateways for more abuse to enter your life. And it's often kept in place by what's described as a misuse of ego, which could just mean a defensive part of us that's trying to protect us, but is actually keeping us stuck.
So what are these portals and gateways? Really, just think of them as vulnerabilities. They're the unhealed wounds from your childhood that leave you open to repeating the very same patterns you're trying so hard to get away from. They're basically the unlocked doors that let more toxic relationships walk right in. Okay, so we've talked about the blueprint and the echo. Now for the most important question. How do you actually break the cycle? Well, it all starts with reclaiming the one thing that gets silenced the most in these situations: your voice.
The source we're referencing uses this fantastic phrase for what happens: getting lost in the sauce. And it's perfect, right? It's that feeling of being so completely consumed by the relationship, so focused on pleasing the other person, that you just lose track of who you are. Your own opinions, your desires, your entire identity just starts to fade away. So you have to ask yourself this and be really honest. Am I afraid of their disapproval? Because for so many people, that one fear, the fear of rocking the boat, of causing a problem, is the invisible chain that keeps them silent. It forces them to swallow their own truth just to keep a false sense of peace. This right here shows the crucial shift you have to make to get your power back. Reacting, getting emotional, defensive, explaining yourself, that's exactly what a narcissist wants. It's their supply. But responding, that's totally different. It's calm, it's detached, it's strategic. This is the whole idea behind a technique called the gray rock method. You make yourself as boring and uninteresting as a gray rock. You don't give them that emotional juice they're looking for, which starves them of supply until eventually they get bored and go somewhere else. All right, let's get into the practical stuff, the tools. Because this isn't just about surviving what happened. It's about actually thriving forward and building a life that is completely on your own terms. It really comes down to 3 key steps for reclaiming your energy. First, boundaries. This can feel huge, so start small. Just practice saying, I like this, or no, I don't like that. It's an amazing way to start finding your voice again. Second, channel your energy. Let go of all that toxic junk you've been carrying and pour that energy into your own goals, your passions. And third, drive your vision. The source uses a great little acronym here: GPS, goals with purpose that connect you to your own inner star power. And here are even more tools for your toolkit. On the outside, build a support system of people who actually see you and get it. On the inside, commit to investing in yourself. Redefine what big words like love and relationship actually mean to you. Journaling is also huge because it helps you see just how far you've come. And finally, maybe one of the most powerful things you can do is just name it. To say out loud, what I went through was abuse. That is a massive step in taking back your own reality.
I want you to let this one sink in. Let this be your new mantra. Your purpose on this planet is your own. You are not here to be a human wastebasket for somebody else's toxic garbage. You're not here to be a battery to power someone else's ego. Your life, your energy, your identity, they are all yours to claim. By learning about all of this and by making the choice to heal, you are actively deciding to end the cycle. You're choosing not to pass on that dysfunctional legacy. And that, right there, makes you the author of a brand new story. So the only question left is, what is the epilogue to your story going to be?
There is nothing to correct. If you take nothing else from this video, especially my stars, please remember that phrase. There is nothing to correct. It really isn't. It was never meant for you to fix or save or reach him or her. It was never meant to be that. Yesterday is gone forever. And so when nostalgia creeps up, remind yourself, and you're not trying to repeat the past, you're not trying to relive the past. Yet, you're not to try to correct the past either, because there's nothing to correct. Yesterday is gone.